The following content may contain visuals that are disturbing, graphic, or sensitive in nature. Viewer discretion is advised. This material is intended for mature audiences and may not be suitable for all viewers. Please exercise caution while watching, and if you find such content distressing, we recommend discontinuing viewing. This disclaimer is provided to ensure awareness and to prioritize viewer well-being.
Hello and welcome. You're watching News 9 Live with me, Neha Khanna. Let's begin with all the top stories we're tracking at this hour. The war between Israel and Hamas has now entered its 56th detail. Here's a complete lowdown. Israel has accused Hamas of violating the expired truce, leading to the resumption of combat in Gaza. Another 8 Israeli hostages were freed from Gaza on Thursday, the last day of the truce. Israeli authorities say they released 30 Palestinian prisoners in return. The U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, meanwhile, has met with leaders from Israel and Palestine. The Houthi rebels are going to resume their military operations against Israel if Israel continues its war. That is according to the statement that's been issued by the Houthis in Yemen. Now, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, over 14,800 people have been killed in the Gaza war so far, and more than 6,000 of the victims were children. The truce between Israel and Hamas expired, with neither side announcing a deal to extend it. Meanwhile, Israel has been dropping leaflets in parts of southern Gaza telling residents to leave, indicating that Israel wants to expand its area of attack. This comes as fighting resumed this morning in the Palestinian territory after the ceasefire, which had been in place since the 24th of November. An hour before the truce was scheduled to end, Israel intercepted a rocket fired from Gaza. On the other side, Hamas-affiliated media reported sounds of explosions and gunfire in the north of the Palestinian enclave. The Israeli military has said further sirens warning a rocket attack sounded again in Israeli areas near Gaza just minutes before the truce expired. Heavy Israeli firing was reported across Gaza and the Rafah border with Egypt. According to the Gazan Health Ministry, 29 Palestinians have been killed in today's Israeli strikes since the truce expired this morning. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israeli President Isaac Herzog on Thursday to discuss the now expired truce between Israel and Hamas. Blinken said a temporary truce between the two sides had produced results and the U.S. was hoping it would continue. Blinken said Washington was focused on helping to secure the release of the remaining hostages in Gaza. Herzog, the Israeli president, informed Antony Blinken that at least 150 hostages remain in captivity in Gaza. The meeting in Tel Aviv took place on a morning when 2 Palestinian attackers opened fire at a bus stop during rush hour at the entrance to Jerusalem, killing at least 3 people and wounding 8 others. Blinken and Herzog condemned the attack.
Well, again, unfortunately, as we are meeting now, there are casualties in a serious terror attack in the entrance to Jerusalem, our capital. 2 terrorists have attacked innocent civilians waiting to be picked up to go on their day's work. And we have casualties, we have loss of life, and I would like to express my heartfelt condolences to the families and of course to pray for the swift recovery of the wounded. This is another example of the situation we're in, the endless war that we are fighting against terror organizations, especially Hamas, in these very complicated and challenging times. I thank you for coming here. As always, you've been expressing the support of the United States, the President, administration, and I must say on behalf of the American people at large, so I thank you very much. We are working and praying and demanding the immediate release of all the hostages, and I thank the United States of America for the immense work it is devoting to the release of the hostages. There are still around 150 hostages who are there in Hamas hands in Gaza.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. This is my fourth visit to Israel since October 7th. And as you said, we're reminded yet again by the events in Jerusalem today of the threat from terrorism that Israel and Israelis face every single day. And like you, my heart goes out to the victims of this attack. I believe one person lost life, maybe as many as three. We're thinking of them, we're thinking of their families, their loved ones, and we mourn their loss just as we mourn the loss of any innocent life. From day one, we have been focused relentlessly on trying to secure the release of hostages from Gaza and from Hamas. And we have seen over the last week the very positive development of hostages coming home, being reunited with their families, and that should continue today.
Meanwhile, Blinken also met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on Thursday in Jerusalem. The U.S. Secretary of State visited Jerusalem for the third time since the war began.
Welcome. Secretary and I had an opportunity to begin the discussion, and there are many issues that we want to talk about. So I want to express our appreciation for your support from the beginning. Presidents, your personal, your delegation, and the war aims of eliminating Hamas and releasing, securing the release of our hostages. You've been very, very helpful. We appreciate it deeply. We'd like to talk to you about the next phase. So that's a summary of what we'd like to talk about and began talking about.
Earlier on Thursday, 8 Israeli hostages were released by Hamas as part of the temporary ceasefire deal. Israel freed 30 Palestinian prisoners in the early hours of Friday while the truce was still in force. Since the truce agreement on the 24th of November, 110 hostages have been released, including 80 Israelis. The majority of the 30 non-Israeli hostages released are from Thailand. They were freed under a separate agreement. Meanwhile, Israel has released 240 Palestinian prisoners in exchange. Families of the hostages rushed to hospitals on Thursday to reunite with their loved ones who'd been held captive by Hamas for 53 days. Among the released hostages is 18-year-old Ite Rigev, who joyfully reunited with his sister Mia. The total number of people seized by Hamas in the 7th October rampage into southern Israel was around 240. As part of a Qatari-mediated deal, 30 Palestinians, including 16 minors and 14 women, were released in exchange on Wednesday. The UN Commission investigating war crimes in the Israel-Hamas conflict will focus on sexual violence by Hamas during the 7th October attacks on Israel. Navi Pillay, the Commission's chair, plans to launch an appeal for evidence and will pass it on to the International Criminal Court. Israel's lack of cooperation poses a challenge, though, with the country citing an alleged anti-Israel bias. Despite this, Pillay has collaborated with ICC prosecutors and condemned Israel's response to the 7th October attacks that resulted in the Israel-Hamas war. The Commission has prioritized investigating the killing of reporters during the ongoing conflict, including Reuters journalist Isam Abdullah.
Impressed with the deputy prosecutor's emphasis on how seriously she wishes to investigate the incidents of sexual violence, the complaints coming from Israel. Well, self-defense doesn't apply here because Gaza is not a state. I agree, it's absolutely shocking the numbers of people that have been killed and continue to face the risk of starvation, killings, and so on, because the bombings and attacks have not stopped.
The US has welcomed the announcement of a probe by India into allegations related to a foiled attempt to kill Khalistani terrorist Gurpatwant Singh Panno. Commenting on the indictment of an Indian national allegedly involved in the plot, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said the Indian probe is good and appropriate.
Finally, with regard to India, first, this is an ongoing legal matter, so you'll understand I can't comment on it in detail. I can say that this is something we take very seriously. A number of us have raised this directly with the Indian government in past weeks. The government announced today that it was conducting an investigation, and that's good and appropriate, and we look forward to seeing the results.
The White House National Security spokesperson John Kirby once again emphasized the gravity of the allegations that have been leveled by the United States in this regard.
India remains a strategic partner, and we're going to continue to work to improve and strengthen that strategic partnership with India. At the same time, we take this very seriously. These allegations and this investigation, take it very seriously. And we're glad to see that the Indians are too, by announcing their own efforts to investigate this. And we've been clear that we want to see anybody held, that's responsible for these alleged crimes to be held properly accountable.
However, let's not forget the American hypocrisy on matter of terrorism. The New York Times has published an article where it calls Panno a Sikh activist. This kind of language manipulation reveals how the West sees only an attack on their regime as an act of terrorism, but dismisses threats to the national security of other countries, downplaying them as acts of political activism. If Panno is an activist, then some would ask, was Osama bin Laden an activist too? Media outlets, especially one of New York Times stature, also has an editorial responsibility to be objective in really all sides of the story, and should have labelled Panno better, given that he has been declared a terrorist by India. Throughout its history, the United States has used its military and covert operations to overthrow or prop up foreign governments in the name of preserving US strategic and business interests. From Afghanistan to Cuba to Iran to Nicaragua to Guatemala, the US has played a part in almost every corner of the world. Moving on now to the other big story we're tracking today. At COP28 in Dubai, nearly 200 nations have converged, each with their unique agenda. Let's take a look at the key players and their respective objectives.
Each country has its own agenda for the nearly 200 nations gathering at COP28 in Dubai. And finding consensus is a challenge, as UN climate negotiations need unanimous support to pass. Here are some of the climate summit's main players and what they're looking for. China, the world leader in both clean and dirty energy. It's responsible for 30% of annual global emissions, making it the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitter. But it also has more renewable energy capacity than anywhere else. China has been feeling the impacts of climate change through heat waves, floods, and extreme drought. Despite having the world's second largest economy after the US, it sees itself as a developing nation in climate talks and argues wealthy, developed nations like the US should move first and fastest in policy and finance. It's part of the bloc of basic countries alongside South Africa, Brazil, and India, who argue the same. The United States is the world's second largest emitter. It comes to COP28 a year into rolling out a $369 billion plus subsidy package for electric vehicles and other green products. Its Inflation Reduction Act is expected to triple the country's clean energy capacity by 2030. But U.S. delegates will face pressure at COP28 after Washington pledged no new climate cash to the United Nations this year. It supports a COP28 deal to phase out CO2-emitting fossil fuel use, despite being the world's biggest oil and gas producer. The 27-country European Union is among the most ambitious. The bloc, along with the U.S., is pushing to triple renewable capacity. It also aims to end new coal-fueled power plants, phase out fossil fuels, and power electricity grids with renewable sources in the 2030s. African countries are pushing for climate finance to speed up green energy projects. But not everyone's on the same page. Some, like Kenya, Ethiopia, and Senegal, have backed calls for phasing out fossil fuel production. Others, like Mozambique, want to develop their reserve of gas to capitalize off European gas demands. But they do agree that any deal on phasing out fossil fuels must allow poor nations to develop reserves in the short term to alleviate energy poverty.
At the UN Climate Summit, a significant achievement as delegates agreed on establishing a fund to aid vulnerable nations in managing the expenses of climate-induced disasters. The agreement, a result of extensive negotiations preceding COP28's opening ceremony in Dubai, involves contributions totaling just over $300 million, including a substantial pledge of $100 million from the United Arab Emirates.
Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
The UN Climate Summit clinched an early victory on Thursday, with delegates adopting a new fund to help vulnerable nations cope with the cost of climate-driven disasters. The deal was adopted following the COP28 opening ceremony in Dubai and already follows many months of negotiations. But some groups were cautious, noting there were still unresolved issues, including how the fund would be financed in the future. The United Arab Emirates will contribute $100 million to the pot, along with other countries contributing a total of just over $300 million. Germany pledged $100 million and the United States $17.5 million, with hopes the amount would build to a substantial sum. The early breakthrough on the damage fund, which poorer nations have demanded for years, could help grease the wheels for further compromises. Earlier in the day, COP28 President Sultan Al Jaber, who is also the CEO of the UAE's national oil company, opened the summit urging countries and fossil fuel companies to work together to meet global climate goals. Al Jaber aimed to strike a conciliatory tone following months of criticism over his appointment as the head of COP28.
Let history reflect the fact that this is the presidency that made a bold choice to proactively engage with oil and gas companies. We had many hard discussions. Let me tell you, that wasn't easy. But today, many of these companies are committing to zero methane emissions by 2030 for the first time. And now, many national oil companies have adopted net zero 2050 targets for the first time. And I'm grateful that they have stepped up to join this game-changing journey. But I must say, it is not enough. And I know that they can do much more.
Over the next 2 weeks, governments will also debate whether to agree, for the first time, to phase out the use of CO2-emitting coal, oil and gas globally, the main source of emissions. Also on the agenda is what's known as the global stocktake. This is when countries assess their progress in meeting global climate goals. The main one being the Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to well below 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees Celsius.
By the end of 2023, global warming is projected to reach approximately 1.4 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, marking a significant deviation and setting a new record, according to the World Meteorological Organization in the provisional state of the Global Climate Report that was released on Thursday. The report underscores the urgency for world leaders grappling with the phase-out of fossil fuels at the UN Climate Summit that's taking place in Dubai. While 2023 is poised to be the warmest year on record, it doesn't necessarily imply an immediate breach of the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold that was outlined in the 2015 Paris Agreement. However, the report serves as a foreboding glimpse into the potential consequences of surpassing 1.5 degrees, with notable impacts including record low Antarctic sea ice, significant glacier loss in Swiss glaciers and extensive wildfires in Canada. The findings emphasize the critical need for sustained efforts to mitigate climate change. The report anticipates potential worsening in 2024 due to the peaking impacts of the El Nino climate pattern. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is in Dubai to attend the COP28 summit. The first COP28 event, co-hosted by India and the UAE, focuses on the Green Credit Program initiated by the Ministry of Environment in October. Another side event, co-hosted by India and Sweden, will mark the launch of Lead IT 2.0, a leadership group for energy transition. This collaborative effort, initiated in 2019, aims to accelerate the industry transition to net zero emissions by fostering collaboration between the public and private sectors. The Prime Minister will also participate in a high-level event titled Transforming Climate Finance. The fight against malaria faces a significant threat due to the ongoing climate crisis. Mosquitoes, the disease carriers, are thriving in warm and humid conditions. The World Health Organization Director General Dr. Tedros has stated that urgent sustainable responses are crucial. The latest World Malaria Report reveals a worrying five-fold increase in cases in Pakistan after severe flooding, providing a breeding ground for mosquitoes. The number of global malaria cases in 2022 was considerably higher than pre-COVID levels, with a rise in deaths to over 600,000 last year. Pregnant women and children under 5 are the most vulnerable. The report emphasizes other threats, including insecticide resistance and an invasive mosquito species. The WHO has highlighted that the climate crisis is a major threat to the battle against malaria. Evidence indicates that extreme weather and rising temperatures have caused a surge in cases. Mosquitoes thriving in warm and humid conditions find ideal breeding grounds in standing water, contributing to a five-fold increase in cases in flood-affected Pakistan, for instance. Previously, malaria-free African highland areas are now vulnerable. Global malaria cases in 2022 remain significantly higher than pre-pandemic levels, with deaths rising from 5.76 lakh in 2019 to over 6 lakh last year. This is equivalent to nearly 12,000 lives lost weekly. The WHO has emphasized the urgent need for sustainable and resilient malaria responses.
The World Malaria Report shows that progress towards key global targets for reducing malaria cases, incidence, and death rates is off track by a wide margin. Given current trends, continuing with the status quo will only lead us further off track. We highlight a number of key actions in the report that are needed to get back on track. First, we need to step up financing. In 2022 alone, there was a global malaria funding gap of $3.7 billion. Second, we need robust political will. Countries must translate their political commitment to universal health coverage into tangible actions and resources that will save lives.
A day after polling ended in 5 states, several exit polls have given an edge to the BJP in Rajasthan. Gajendra Singh Shekhawat the BJP MP from Jodhpur has expressed the confidence that the party will form the next government in the state.
बीजेपी के वरिष्ठ नेता और केंद्रीय मंत्री गजेंद्र सिंह शेखावत हमारे साथ हैं। सर, एग्जिट पोल आपने भी देखा, तो क्या जो एग्जिट पोल्स के जो नतीजे दिखाया जा रहा है, आपको लगता है सच होगा?
देखिए, भारतीय जनता पार्टी प्रचंड बहुमत के साथ सरकार में आ रही है। ये मैं पहले भी कह रहा था, आज से 6 महीने पहले भी कह रहा था और आज भी कह रहा हूँ। और आप सभी लोग जो थोड़ा बहुत दाएं हो रहे हैं, थोड़ा बहुत बाएं हो रहे हैं, 2 दिन रुक जाइए, आप सब लोग संवेद स्वर में इसी बात को एंडोर्स करते हुए वापस दिखाई देंगे।
अशोक गहलोत कह रहे हैं कि अगर बीजेपी का ने जो धर्म कार्ड खेला, अगर वो नहीं चला तो फिर अशोक गहलोत नहीं कांग्रेस सरकार बनने जा रही है।
ये पिछले 5 साल तक अपने वोटों को कंसोलिडेट करने के लिए तुष्टीकरण की राजनीति करने का पाप अशोक गहलोत साहब ने किया। पाकिस्तान से जो लोग हिंदू विस्थापित होकर के आते हैं, अपनी बहू बेटियों की इज्जत को बचाने के लिए वहां से अपना सब कुछ गंवा करके आते हैं, ऐसे गरीब लोगों की नैसर्गिक मातृभूमि भारत में उनको सुविधा प्रदान करने के लिए भारत सरकार यदि कानून बनाती है और गहलोत साहब उस सीए के एक्ट का विरोध करने के लिए एक मजहब विशेष के हजारों लोगों को लेकर के और पुलिस के संरक्षण में मार्च करते हैं, तब वो कौन सा कार्ड होता है? हिंदू त्योहारों पर प्रतिबंध लगाया जाता है, तब वो कौन सा कार्ड होता है? मंदिर गिराए जाते हैं, तब वो कौन सा कार्ड होता है? एक ही दिन में 2 घटनाएं, गरीब जो है दलित परिवार के 2 बच्चों को गैंगवार के आशंका में कुचल करके चिथड़े चिथड़े कर दिया जाता है। उनके परिवार के सदस्य 10 दिन तक सड़क पर बैठे रह करके सामान्य मुआवजे की मांग करते हैं, सरकार के कान तक वो बात नहीं पहुंचती। और एक रोड रेज की घटना में मारे जाने वाले व्यक्ति को 50 लाख रुपए 1 घंटे में दे करके गहलोत साहब ट्वीट करते हैं, तब वो कौन सा कार्ड होता है? अपने गिरेबान में झांक करके देखें कि धर्म की राजनीति कौन कर रहा है।
लेकिन उन्हें तो जादूगर कहा जाता है।
वो इसीलिए जादूगर कि उनको अपना किया हुआ शायद दिखता नहीं है, दूसरों का दिखाने की कोशिश करते हैं।
एक आखिरी सवाल, आपने कहा कि प्रचंड बहुमत से बीजेपी की सरकार बनने जा रही है, तो मुख्यमंत्री कौन बनेगा?
चलिए, ये सवाल तो 2-3 दिन के लिए विधायकों और पार्लियामेंट्री बोर्ड पर छोड़ दीजिए।
Exit polls have predicted a win for the BJP in Madhya Pradesh. News 9 spoke to Sadhvi Pragya Singh Thakur, the BJP MP from Bhopal, about the party's chances to come back to power. She expressed complete confidence about BJP's chances and the potential to achieve a full majority. Listen in.
भोपाल सांसद साध्वी प्रज्ञा सिंह ठाकुर जी हमारे साथ हैं, उनसे बातचीत करते हैं। दीदी, एग्जिट पोल आपने देखे, 5-6 एग्जिट पोल आए हैं, कुछ में बीजेपी की सरकार बनती हुई दिखाई दे रही है, कुछ में कांग्रेस की सरकार बनती हुई दिखाई दे रही है, क्या प्रतिक्रिया आपकी?
जहां हम बहुत कम थे वहां पे हम बहुत अच्छी स्थिति में आ रहे हैं, लेकिन जहां हमने काम सरकार में रह करके किए हैं, हम वहां बहुमत से भी पार हो रहे हैं और लक्ष्य को भी आगे बढ़ाते हुए जा रहे हैं और भारतीय जनता पार्टी का कार्य बोलता है।
आप कह रहे हैं कि बहुमत से या लक्ष्य पार हो रहे हैं, लक्ष्य 116 का है, आपको लग रहा है इसके आसपास ही बीजेपी की सीटें आ रही है?
भाजपा का लक्ष्य 150 का था और इसलिए हम 150 से को भी आगे पाएंगे, तो हम लक्ष्य से आगे हैं।
ये तो एजेंसीज के सर्वे की बात हुई, आध्यात्मिक सर्वे क्या कह रहा है आप?
मेरा तो मैंने पहले ही डिक्लेयर कर दिया था कि भाजपा की सरकार बन रही है और बहुत अच्छे से बन रही है।
क्या मुद्दे रहे हैं इस बार? क्या ये लाडली बहना योजना शुरू हुई है, इसका इम्पैक्ट है, या कोई और चीजें आपको नजर आती है जिसके कारण बीजेपी की सरकार बनेगी?
लाडली बहना भी एक योजना है, इसके पहले भी जो योजनाएं चली हैं वो सब समाज के हित में है, लोगों के हित में है, हर वर्ग के हित में है, हर किसी का उत्थान हुआ है, रोजगार मिले हैं और महिलाओं को क्यों पीछे रखा जाए, ये भी एक विषय आगे आया है और इसलिए महिलाओं का भी उत्थान करते हुए बहनों के लिए भी योजना है, माताओं के लिए योजना है, गर्भवती माताओं के लिए योजना है, कन्याओं के लिए योजना है, उनके विवाह की योजनाएं हैं, लोगों को घर मिले वो योजना है, उज्ज्वला गैस योजना है, उनकी आंखों को तकलीफ नहीं हो, मातृशक्ति को भी अच्छे से सुख से भोजन बनाने और खिलाने का प्रसन्नता से अधिकार है, तो और कोई भूखा ना रहे। आपातकाल भी अगर विपत्ति काल भी अगर आता है, प्राकृतिक आपदा भी आती है, तो भाजपा की सरकार में जिस प्रकार से समाज का सहयोग किया जाता है, समाज वास्तव में बहुत साथ दे रही हो और जनता कहती है समाज साथ में और समाज कहता है कि ऐसी सरकार मैंने कभी नहीं देखी, ऐसा जीवन अब हमें जो मिल रहा है, इसलिए हम साथ में हैं भाजपा के।
ये तो आपने उन सर्वे की बात कर ली जहां बीजेपी की सरकार बन रही है, जहां कांग्रेस की सरकार बन रही है, वहां आपको क्या लगता है क्या कमी रह गई होगी?
भाजपा की सरकार सभी तरफ आ रही है। हम ये बिल्कुल मान के नहीं चल रहे हैं कि भाजपा कहीं पीछे है।
इसके बाद लोकसभा की भी तैयारियां हैं,
बिल्कुल समय आ रहा है उसका भी।
आपकी तैयारी ठीक चल रही है भोपाल में?
ये तो जनता बताती है। आज हम एड्स का जो चल रहा है, एड्स से बचाव के लिए, तो वो हम आज हमारी जनता आई हुई है और हम भोपाल से लेकर के पूरे देश को ये संदेश देना चाहते हैं कि एड्स जैसे रोग हमारे भारतीय परिवेश के नहीं हैं, इनको यहाँ नहीं रहना चाहिए। आप सावधान रहिए। आपको किसी भी प्रकार से किसी के भी उसमें आप अगर डॉक्टर के संपर्क में आते हैं, अगर नर्स इंजेक्शन लगाती है, आपका अधिकार है कि आप उसको देख करके लगवाइए कि कहीं कोई दूसरे से टच किया हुआ सोया हो, दूसरे से टच किया हुआ कहीं कोई ब्लड आपको ना लग जाए। ये आपकी सावधानी है, ये सब आपको करना चाहिए। और इंजेक्शन भी आप अगर लगवा रहे हैं, नर्स लगा रही है, तो आपको ध्यान होना चाहिए कि कितनी सावधानी रखी जा रही है। आप कह सकते हो उसको। और इस प्रकार से एक जागरण जो देश में आना चाहिए, हम भोपाल के साथ पूरे देश से कहते हैं आप सावधान रहिए और सचेत रहिए अपने अधिकारों के प्रति और रोग से मुक्त रहिए। ये एड्स जैसे रोग जानलेवा होते हैं, इसलिए इनसे बचिए और स्वस्थ रहिए, प्रसन्न रहिए।
एक आखिरी सवाल, चूंकि लोकसभा का जिक्र हो गया, आप चाहती हैं दिग्विजय सिंह एक बार फिर से आपके सामने आए?
देखिए, ऐसा है कि भाजपा चुनौतियों का सामना करती रही है और इनके पास कोई भी ऐसा नहीं है कि जो भारतीय जनता पार्टी को ऐसी चुनौती दे सके कि भारतीय जनता पार्टी घबरा जाए। कदापि नहीं है, क्योंकि संगठन का जो निर्णय रहता है वो एकदम सटीक रहता है और बहुत अच्छी तैयारी है। भाजपा की सदैव तैयारी रहती है, उनको विशेष कुछ नहीं करना पड़ता कि अब ये आ गया इसलिए अब ये विशेष कुछ करें। वो तो निरंतर विकास करते हैं, इसलिए हम निरंतर तैयार हैं।
चलिए, साध्वी प्रज्ञा सिंह ठाकुर हमसे बातचीत कर रही थी। काफ़ी कॉन्फिडेंट है कि सारे ही राज्यों में बीजेपी की सरकार आ रही है। दूसरी तरफ लोकसभा को लेकर भी उनकी तैयारियां पूरी तरह से चल रही है।
The Defence Acquisition Council has shown the green light to a major defence procurement plan. Chaired by Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, the DAC has approved the acquisition of 97 additional Tejas Mark 1A fighter jets that would cost 66,000 crore. This is on top of the 83 jets that have already been ordered and are expected to be delivered starting February next year. These will, of course, be made by Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. The DAC has also sanctioned 156 light combat helicopters at a price of 53,000 crore. Additionally, the DAC has given the green light for the Su-30 MKI aircrafts upgraded by HAL, which have further enhanced air power. On the ground, the DAC cleared the procurement of 400 towed artillery guns at a cost of 9,900 crore following a previous approval for 307 such guns in March this year. The DAC's acceptance of necessity is extended to anti-tank munitions capable of neutralizing tanks and armoured personnel carriers. Impressively, 98% of the proposed acquisitions totaling 2.2 lakh crore will be sourced domestically, underlining a commitment to bolstering the country's defence capabilities through indigenous production. Following an advisory from the centre regarding a mysterious pneumonia outbreak in China, Kerala has bolstered its surveillance measures. The Chief Minister has reassured that the state has not observed any abnormal surge in respiratory cases in the last 3 months. The Union Health Ministry has issued an advisory to states and union territories, asking them to review and enhance public health and hospital readiness against all respiratory illnesses as a precautionary measure. 6 Indian states, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Uttarakhand, Karnataka, Haryana and Tamil Nadu, have been placed on red alert. Let's listen in to what the authorities are saying.
China development, I told our officers to just look into all that. And then we also received guidelines from Government of India. So now we have told all our hospitals to be prepared to just check the preparation, do some mock drills, see if the availability of oxygen, beds, PPE kits, all those things should be there, and just keep a lookout. Right now, there's nothing to panic, or there's no such situation. But till further guidelines from Government of India, we will wait. But we're just keeping ourselves prepared and letting people know about the situation. And general public also, we warn them that just be aware of this and be careful.
அந்த வகையில் இந்த மாதமும் கூட டிசம்பர் மாதம் இன்னமும் 5 வாரங்கள் இந்த மருத்துவ முகாம்கள் தொடர்ந்து நடத்தப்படவிருக்கிறது. வருகிற சனிக்கிழமை முதல் அந்த 2ஆம் தேதி ஒரு முகாமும், 9ஆம் தேதி ஒரு முகாமும், 16ஆம் தேதி ஒரு முகாமும், 23ஆம் தேதி ஒரு முகாமும், 30ஆம் தேதி ஒன்றும். இதேபோல் ஒவ்வொரு நாளும் 2000த்திற்கும் மேற்பட்ட முகாம்கள் நடத்தப்படும். இதிலும் கூட இந்த வருகிற 5 வாரங்களில் இன்னும் ஒரு 10,000 முகாம்கள் நடத்தப்படும். ஆக ஒரு பருவமழையில் 20,000த்திற்கும் மேற்பட்ட மருத்துவ முகாம்கள் நடத்தப்பட்டது என்பது மருத்துவத்துறை வரலாற்றில் இதுதான் முதல் முறை.
The Bengaluru police have responded to bomb threats sent via email to 13 schools alleging the presence of explosives on their premises. Students and staff were evacuated as authorities swiftly responded, initiating searches across all these schools. Bomb disposal squads were dispatched to locations in Whitefield, Korimangala, Basvesh Nagar, Yalahanka and Sadashiv Nagar. The Karnataka Deputy Chief Minister D.K. Shivkumar visited one of these schools that's close to his residence in Bengaluru after the school received the threat. Meanwhile, a senior police official told the local media that the search operations were underway and it seems like the threat could be a hoax.
Now I came and asked my wife, I said, "Good morning, it is going on." He also came.
The Supreme Court has questioned the Tamil Nadu Governor R.N. Ravi's choice to refer bills to the President after he had already announced his decision to withhold assent. The bench headed by Chief Justice of India, T.Y. Chandrachud, along with Justices J.B. Pardiwala and Manoj Mishra, emphasized once the Governor has decided to withhold assent, he cannot later refer them to the President. According to the bench, Article 200 provides the Governor with 3 options that include granting assent, withholding assent, and referring the bill to the President. Importantly, the bench asserted that after choosing any of these 3 options, the Governor cannot opt for another. Let's give you a short timeline of this matter. On the 13th of November, the Governor declared that he was withholding his assent for 10 bills. In response, the Tamil Nadu Legislative Assembly held a special session on the 18th of November and reenacted these bills. The Governor, R.N. Ravi, then decided to refer the reenacted bills for the President's approval. The Supreme Court has now questioned this decision by the Governor. This isn't the first time that the Apex Court has expressed its reservations on this matter. It's questioned the Governor even in the past. This issue came up on the 20th of November. The Supreme Court had criticized the Governor for keeping the bills pending for over 3 years. The court referenced its 23rd November judgment in the Punjab Governor's case, which unequivocally stated that a Governor must return a bill to the Assembly if he has withheld his assent and cannot indefinitely delay a decision on a bill. Opposition parties in Bangladesh have declared a boycott of the upcoming general election, as none of their candidates, in fact, even registered their nominations on the final day. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party, Bangladesh Jamaat-e-Islami and their allies have confirmed their non-participation in the elections scheduled to be held on the 7th of January. BNP and its allies have announced a 48-hour strike beginning the 3rd of December, demanding the cancellation of the election schedule and a neutral election time government, a demand that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has consistently rejected. In an interview with the New York Times, Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen has emphasized that China's leadership is currently grappling with significant internal changes, making the prospect of an invasion of Taiwan less likely. Despite China's heightened military pressure on Taiwan over the past 4 years, Tsai pointed out that China has numerous pressing domestic issues to address. She reiterated that Taiwan's future should be determined by its own people. Tsai raised concern that China may attempt to interfere in Taiwan's presidential and parliamentary elections scheduled to be held on the 13th of January next year. Survivors fleeing violence in Sudan's West Darfur recounted harrowing experiences of rape by armed fighters disguised in RSF military attire or the traditional robes and turbans worn by Arab militiamen. These assaults occurred during targeted attacks on El Janina city.
A 19-year-old abducted and raped by 4 men over 3 days. A 28-year-old women's rights activist seized from her doorstep and raped while being held for hours in an abandoned house. A 24-year-old raped by armed men in her home just a few feet from her mother.
They said, "We'll kill her if you don't give yourself to us." I sacrificed myself and said, "Whatever you want to do to me instead of killing my mother."
These are among 11 young women interviewed by Reuters who say they were sexually assaulted amid a war in Sudan by members of the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces and allied Arab militiamen. They are all from the non-Arab Masalit ethnic group, which has been targeted in Sudan's West Darfur by the Arab-dominated RSF and its allies. At a refugee camp in neighbouring Chad, this 27-year-old medical assistant said she had been sheltering at a displacement camp in the West Darfur city El Geneina when men in RSF uniforms arrived and shot several Masalit men. They recognised her as the wife of a Masalit community activist and asked his whereabouts. She told them she didn't know.
One beat me while I was lying on the floor. They assaulted me and I kept screaming. While I was screaming, they stuffed a scarf in my mouth so I couldn't scream. After that, one held my arms. There were about 5 of them. Some were beating me. 3 were assaulting me. After the 3, I lost consciousness. I didn't know where I was, and I couldn't see or hear.
El Geneina was at the centre of a surge in ethnically targeted violence from late April, just after Sudan's conflict began, to mid-June. Survivors described civilians being slaughtered, picked off by snipers, mowed down by automatic weapons, and burned alive in their homes. In early November, the RSF and its allies waged another wave of attacks in the city. The women in this report were interviewed in the Chadian border town Ardre in July and August. Reuters was unable to independently corroborate all the details of their accounts, but in many instances family members and friends confirmed elements of their stories. All 11 said the men who attacked them wore either RSF military uniforms or the robes and turbans commonly worn by Arab militiamen.
He threatened me with a weapon and told me, "Are you going to take off your clothes or not?"
This 25-year-old says she told her assailants she would rather die. Instead, they said, they would kill her brothers.
At that point, I surrendered.
Nearly all of the women interviewed said they were raped by multiple men, and all said it was at gunpoint. 6 said their attackers mentioned their Masalit identity or used ethnic slurs for the Masalit and other darker-skinned non-Arabs. Emir Massa Asil, a tribal leader in El Geneina, has dismissed the rape allegations as empty lies. He leads one of the largest Arab tribes in West Darfur, a group from which many RSF leaders hail. Arab tribal traditions prohibit sexual assault and bar marrying Masalit. In a phone interview, Asil said if he couldn't bring himself to marry a Masalit woman, why would I take her by force? He also blamed the Masalit for starting the conflict. The RSF didn't respond to detailed questions for this report. It has said of the broader conflict in Sudan that it opposes any abuses against civilians. Speaking about the Darfur region, the paramilitary group's deputy head, Abdul Rahim Dagalo, said this in November.
The RSF will not provide support to perpetrators, but will respond swiftly and resolutely. We assure our firm readiness to collaborate with the Investigations Committee to present any individuals involved in violations to fair and just sentences.
The sexual assault reports come amid a war in Sudan between the army and the RSF. More than 10,000 people have been killed and 6 million displaced. The United Nations has said that across Sudan it has received credible reports of conflict-linked sexual violence involving more than 100 victims. But at the camp on Chad's border, survivors are having to live with the physical and emotional scars of their ordeal. This woman says she was taken to a room and raped by 2 men. She tries to be patient, she says, and not show her emotions, so people won't look at her as a victim and judge her behind her back. But under the surface, she says, she is very depressed. Sometimes, she adds, I feel like my life has ended.
6 shirts worn by Lionel Messi during Argentina's triumphant run at the 2020 World Cup are expected to become the most valuable collection of sports memorabilia. The collection includes the shirt he wore during the first half of the final in Qatar. Bidding for the white and sky blue shirts will begin on the 14th of December, coinciding with a public exhibition to showcase the entire collection. Michael Jordan's jersey from the opening game of the 1998 NBA Finals holds the record for the highest price paid for a game-worn sports memorabilia item, fetching $10.1 million last year.
We have 6 jerseys here that Messi wore during the 2022 FIFA World Cup, all the way from the group stages through the round of 16, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, and of course the match that everyone remembers, the finals against France, where 1.5 billion people were tuned into. These are all match-worn jerseys. He wore all of them during the first half of each match. And yes, if you look up close, there's definitely dirt on them. And they're the real thing, and they have provenance directly from him. Typically, sometimes the jerseys are washed, sometimes they're not. Oftentimes it happens in the locker room, and collectors know that. Smell is something that we definitely have to consider, but at the same time, the collectors typically don't care one way or another. For certain athletes, it can actually be something that you consider when you're purchasing the jersey. But in this case, they all smell fine. One thing that's interesting is the shirt that was worn against Australia was actually also his 1,000th appearance for club and country. And so it's just kind of a funny thing that it happens to be in this set, but a very cool thing to know.
Julia Roberts has embarked on a thrilling role in a new film, confronting unknown dangers and strangers in a gripping storyline that promises suspense and intrigue.
Well, just the idea of playing someone who's sort of intrinsically suspicious and a little prickly, which is not my nature.
Not Julia at all. Not at all.
But to still make her human and approachable and likable and
which I will say only Julia could do.
Well,
with a character like this, I don't think anybody would have hung in there watching a movie about Amanda unless Julia was playing her.
It's working. Get a bat.
I'm so sorry to bother you, but this is our house.
This is your house?
The thing that really struck me about the book was how this theme about how we can easily lose sight of our common humanity when we're in the face of crisis. And I felt like that was just a really good foundation to build a disaster film on, because it was kind of inverting the process of what a typical disaster film is, which is to not to fixate on the disaster elements, but to really be with the characters and have those elements be more off in the distance.
Whatever it is, it's happening to all of us.
I just want to know, what is the truth?
Shanghai Disneyland previewed its upcoming Zootopia-themed area before the official opening on the 20th of December. The attraction includes a trackless ride to pursue the character Bellwether and a show featuring Zootopia residents. Visitors also have the opportunity to meet actors portraying key characters like Judy Hopps and Nick Wilde from the movie. Seventeen joins the prestigious lineup of K-pop stars set to dazzle at the 2023 MAMA Awards, offering an electrifying performance for fans globally. And that's a wrap on the show. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned to Newsline Live for all the latest news updates.
चलो जी कौनी